Welcome to The Explainer. You know that feeling like you're living in the ruins of the future? Today, we're diving into Mark Fisher's incredible book, Capitalist Realism. It's a work that puts a name to that quiet, kind of pervasive sense that things are just, well, gonna keep going like this, forever.
Okay, so this one idea is really at the heart of everything Fisher's talking about. And it's a phrase you've probably heard before, right? It gets attributed to thinkers like Frederick Jameson or Slavoj Žižek, and it just perfectly captures the whole essence of what Fisher calls capitalist realism.
So, to really get a handle on this, Fisher does something interesting. He doesn't start with some dense economic theory. Nope, he starts with a movie. And it's this very specific kind of dystopia that feels, well, just a little too familiar. And why is that? Because he argues it's not some alternative to our world. It's a chilling extension of it.
That film is Children of Men, and it's set in a world where, get this, humanity has become infertile. For a whole generation, not a single child has been born. The future has literally been canceled. But here's the kicker. Society just keeps on chugging along.
And this is exactly what's so powerful about the movie's vision, and it's what Fisher really latches onto. See, the apocalypse here isn't some clean break. It's messy. You've got internment camps right next to franchise coffee shops. You've got these incredible works of art, like Picasso's Guernica, that are just stripped of all their political meaning and used as wallpaper for the super rich. The catastrophe isn't a big explosion, it's a slow, grinding fade out. The world doesn't end with a bang, it just kind of unravels.
So this vision from the film, this idea of a future that literally can't imagine a future, that becomes the perfect lens for Fisher to diagnose our own cultural and political atmosphere.
Now, this is absolutely crucial. Capitalist realism isn't some cheerleading argument for capitalism. Not at all. It's more like this quiet, resigned acceptance that, hey, it's the only game in town. It's like the background noise that's always on telling you that any alternative is just a complete fantasy. It's that cultural logic that just shrugs and says, well, this is just the way things are.
Now, Fisher's really careful to draw a line between this and postmodernism. Postmodernism, he says, came about when there were still real political alternatives out there. You know, like Soviet socialism. But capitalist realism, that's what comes after all that collapsed. It's not about confronting modernism anymore. Modernism is just another retro style you can pull off the shelf. And this is the big one. It's not just about the system absorbing rebellious ideas anymore. It's about shaping those ideas for the market before they've even had a chance to breathe, a process he calls pre-corporation. And we're going to dig into that right now.
Okay, so what does this atmosphere actually feel like in our everyday culture? You know, what does it look like? What does it sound like?
Well, according to Fisher, it feels like we've hit a kind of cultural end of history. There's this nagging feeling that there are no real shocks of the new left. Nothing truly original is coming. So instead, what does culture do? It just keeps reheating the past. I mean, just think about all the reboots, the sequels, the retro fashion. It's because that belief in a radically different future has just sort of faded away.
And this quote about Kurt Cobain just nails that feeling of being stuck. Fisher saw Cobain as this really tragic figure who completely embodied this struggle. I mean, all his angst was a protest against being turned into a spectacle, right? But that protest, it became one of the most successful spectacles of its time.
So this is that pre-corporation idea in action. The words alternative or independent, they don't mean something outside the system anymore. They're just marketing categories inside it. And it's the same thing with gangster rap. Fisher points out how its claim to realness, you know, this raw look at a dog-eat-dog world, well, that turned out to be super marketable. It basically took a really bleak worldview and turned it into a best-selling product.
But this whole seamless reality, it has hidden costs. Fisher argues that if you start to look really closely, you can actually see the cracks. You can see the places where the system's dysfunction becomes pretty much impossible to ignore. And one of the biggest symptoms he points to is the huge rise in mental distress. He calls it an invisible plague that's spreading through our societies. I mean, look at this data here. It shows a really stark increase in the number of people reporting distress just from one generation to the next.
And this is where Fisher makes a really radical suggestion. He says we have to stop treating these things as just individual, private chemical problems. Instead, he argues we need to see them as the result of our social and political conditions. Basically, a system that takes all its structural stress and just offloads it, dumps it right onto the minds of individuals. And just asking that question, that itself is a political act, because it completely reframes the conversation. Suddenly, it's not about personal failings anymore.
It's about a society that is, in some really fundamental way, making its own people sick.
Okay, the other hidden cost Fisher points to is this bizarre new kind of bureaucracy, and he gives it this really provocative name, market Stalinism. And what is that? Well, it's what happens when all the systems that are supposed to make things efficient and high quality end up doing the exact opposite.
I mean, just take a look at this example from education. The sheer amount of bureaucratic paperwork a university lecturer has to do, it's all designed to measure and audit their performance. But what happens in practice? Well, you get a situation where people are spending more time and energy representing their work than actually doing the work. It's all about PR and auditing instead of, teaching and research. And really, is it any surprise that this kind of endless pressure feeds right back into that mental distress we were just talking about?
So all of this brings us right back to that fundamental question. If capitalist realism is this all-encompassing thing, is there really no alternative?
Well, part of the problem is that even our attempts to critique the system just get folded right back into it. Fisher uses the example of a movie like Disney's WALL-E, right? It's this powerful critique of corporate greed and out-of-control consumerism, but it's also a massive blockbuster product made by one of the biggest corporations on the planet.
There's actually a name for this phenomenon, interpassivity. And here's what it means. The movie feels bad about capitalism for us so that we don't have to. It performs our anti-capitalist sentiment for us. And so we watch it, we consume the critique, we feel a little bit of that catharsis, and then we can go about our day without actually having to do anything, our behavior totally unchanged.
And this, right here, is the ultimate deadlock. If capitalism is so good at absorbing everything, even the very idea that there's an outside to it, then how can any real, meaningful resistance ever even get off the ground?
So Fisher doesn't give us some easy, simple answer. For him, the most important first step is the diagnosis itself. It's about realizing that this realism we're living in, it's not effective nature, it's not like gravity. It's an ideology, it's a constructed reality. And just by naming it, by making those invisible structures visible to ourselves and others, we take the very first step toward, maybe, just maybe, dismantling it.
And really, that's the ultimate takeaway here. Fisher's analysis isn't supposed to be a message of pure hopelessness. It's a challenge, because by showing us that our reality is just one possible story out of many, he leaves us with this powerful, lingering question. If this is all just a construct that can be rewritten, then what's stopping us from writing a different story?